Hey, what's going on everybody? My name is Tyler and welcome back to another video on my channel. In today's video I've got a brand new life story for you guys, one that actually happened last summer, and it's a bit of a wild one, so buckle in. So around May of last summer my roommates and I decided to go on like a little weekend cabin trip. And for this trip we were going to go stay at my family's cabin up in North Michigan, and this cabin's pretty deep in the woods. And so we ended up leaving on a Friday night, and one of my roommates, he was working that afternoon, so we ended up picking him up directly from work and just going straight from his work to the cabin. And we had this weekend prepared and prepped perfectly. We'd brought like an ounce of wax with us, an ounce of flour with us, and a half ounce of mushrooms. And so after about an hour and a half of driving, we get all the way up to North Michigan and end up getting off the exit where the cabin is. And the first thing we do is we pull into the grocery store parking lot and go in and do some shopping for the weekend that we were staying up there. So after we ended up grabbing all the groceries and food and just beer and whatnot we wanted, we all hopped back in the car and made our way down the last 15 minutes to the cabin. And granted, since we picked up our one roommate and we ended up leaving town at 9 o'clock at night, by the time we had made it up to where the cabin was, it was completely pitch black. And so we're driving down the last few sections of dirt road, getting through the woods and making our way to the cabin. And after a strenuous 10 minutes of just driving really slowly with my high beams on because we couldn't see anything, we finally pull into the cabin driveway and we unload and unpack all of our shit really quick and bring it all into the cabin. And so once we got into the cabin, we all kind of picked rooms, settled in, and put our shit down. So after we got all our shit sorted out and got our rooms situated and whatnot, we ended up just kind of trying to figure out what to do at this point. So we all decided to go ahead and crack a couple beers that we had picked up. We had a bottle of Jack Daniels, so we took a shot and then kind of decided, fuck it. You know, let's dose a little bit of these mushrooms that we brought. So we grabbed the bag of mushrooms and we start looking through all our shit and realize immediately at that moment we forgot to bring a scale. So all of us just kind of looked at each other and were like, well, I guess our only way to measure here is going to be based off of caps and stems. So each one of us reached into the bag and grabbed a cap about the size of a quarter. We all ate that one mushroom cap, and then all of us kind of looked at each other and simultaneously were like, let's take another. And so one cap turned into two caps, which I believe, if I remember right, turned into a third plus like two stems. So if I had to estimate or take an educated guess based on the size of the mushrooms, it was probably around 2.5 to 3 grams each that we all took that night. And none of us had really eaten much for the day. And so after we eat these mushrooms, I kind of decide, you know, I should go set up these speakers facing out to the window because we were planning on having a fire right after that. So I go ahead and grab my speakers and start setting them up in my bedroom window because the bedroom I had a window that was facing out towards the fire pit. And while I was getting the speakers set up so that we could all listen to music, Patrick and Greg, my roommates, were outside getting the fire started. And so I get the speakers set up and I end up heading outside to go help them start with the fire. And I start bringing chairs over to the fire pit so that all of us have a place to sit. And so we get this fire started, everybody has their seat, and we're just kind of hanging out around here drinking beers at this point. And it had been around 30 to 45 minutes since we had first dosed our mushrooms. And so at this point, all three of us are kind of getting the tinglies, we're getting giggly, you know. And so we got the music going, we're just kind of vibing, jamming. I remember we were so far away from light pollution and so deep into the woods that when we had all the exterior lights on the cabin turned off, we could look up into the sky and just see nothing but the stars. And I remember when I was tripping on those mushrooms, looking up at the sky, looking at the stars, it literally just looked like a realistic animated version of like Vincent van Gogh's Starry Night. All the stars mixed with the moon, they were all just kind of warping and waving together. All the constellations that you could see were like shifting. It looked absolutely insane. So I remember we're sitting there just, like I said, all talking, zoning out, tripping balls in the woods, looking at all the different trees and everything that there is. And that particular night when we had gotten there, it was pretty chilly overnights then, so I had on this black sweatshirt and I had my hood up most of the night. And there was one point during the mushroom trip where Patrick, my roommate, ended up pointing out, because of how dark it was outside there and the fact that I had a black hoodie on with my hood up, Patrick was saying that I just looked like a floating head in like a black abyss just sitting there in the dark because there was no other kind of light pollution or anything behind me. Directly behind me was just woods. So after hanging out around the fire for a couple hours, just absolutely tripping balls, talking, you know, hanging out, drinking a few beers, we'd taken a look at the time and noticed that it was around 4 o'clock in the morning and we still wanted to do stuff the next day. So we decided to go ahead and put the fire out and move everything inside. So we all start walking in towards the cabin, and as soon as we get up to it, we notice the screen door is just absolutely covered in mayflies. And this was a result of us unintentionally leaving the lights on inside of the cabin and just not thinking about it. And sure, there were a lot, but it really wasn't that bad to us at the time. Like, it didn't seem like it was going to be that bad because we only saw them on the outside, right? But as soon as we opened that door, inside the cabin surrounding every single light fixture on the ceiling was just loaded with mayflies. They were fucking everywhere, flying all over the place, swarming inside the cabin. And if you're unfamiliar with mayflies, they're basically like these giant ass looking mothy insects. They don't really do anything, they just kind of fly around and then die about 20 hours later, but it's more so just gross and annoying. And so as we see all these mayflies inside, it's just multiplied and even worse by us tripping, so it just seems like there are so fucking many. And we're all running around the cabin trying to figure out the source of where they're coming from, because the main screen door that we all came in is completely fine. There's no holes in that screen, it's perfectly fine. But then 2 and 2 hit me. It was the window with the speakers. So I run into my room and I go and check that window and turn on the lights in the room, and as soon as I do that, the entire room is just swarmed with mayflies. And I noticed that the screen that's on the window is so old that it had a bunch of holes in it, which at first when we were putting the speakers up, it was so dark we couldn't even see those. So all these mayflies were flying into the cabin through the window. I ended up pulling the speakers out, shutting the window. We ended up turning off pretty much every single light in the house except for a far one on the opposite side of the house to attract them all over there and away from us. And so we decided while we were going to wait for them to all fly to the other light on the other side of the house, we were going to roll a joint and go outside and smoke it. That way we didn't have to be in here surrounded by all these fucking disgusting mayflies. And so I have a seat on this couch and I'm sitting there breaking down some weed and trying to roll a joint, and mind you, I am just tripping balls. And because mayflies' lifespans are so short, there's mayflies just dropping dead, falling all around us, all over this cabin. And so I'm sitting here just struggling to roll this joint, and Patrick, my roommate, is like, you know, Tyler rolls a pretty good joint, right as I'm like licking it sealed. And the minute I seal it and hold it up, I'm like, Patrick, I'm not gonna lie to you, this is a terrible joint. And it's just all floppy and shitty. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was just tripping so hard and there was all these mayflies that were around us and I just wanted outside. So after we finished laughing about the terribly rolled joint, I end up giving the rolling tray and the weed over to my roommate Greg, and he rolls us up a joint that's like a million times better, way more smokable. And we step outside and end up smoking this joint outside while we're waiting for all these mayflies to move to the other half of the cabin. And by the time the joint had finished and we had went back inside the cabin, 90% of the mayflies that were still alive had been all attracted towards the light in the kitchen area, opposite of where everyone was, and the floor was just absolutely riddled with dead ones. And so at this point, it's like 5:30 in the morning. All of us were, you know, coming down from our trip, but we're all fucking hammered drunk and just kinda over it. We wanted to go to bed. So I ended up shutting my bedroom door to keep all the mayflies that were still alive that were like initially coming in from the window in there. And that night I ended up just sleeping on the couch, putting on a movie and calling it a night. The next morning, once we all finally woke up at like 10:30 or 11, all the mayflies were dead and the floor was just absolutely riddled. We ended up spending the first 30 minutes of all of us being awake on just sweeping up all of the dead mayflies, picking up all of them and getting them all out of there. Obviously the next night after that, we definitely learned our lesson and just made it a point to keep every single light in the cabin off. And I also ended up taking a bunch of towels and blankets and stuffing the open parts of the screen around the speakers so that way it couldn't get any other bugs to come in through there. No light leak or anything. But with that being said, that's pretty much where this story ends. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one, and like I said, it was a bit of a wild ride. And if you guys have stuck around and made it this far into the video all the way back here to the end, you guys are some real true fans, so please be sure to leave a like down below. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel, it means a lot. I should be live streaming tonight here on YouTube, so hopefully I see some of you guys in there. Thanks again for watching today's upload. I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.